Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're really diving deep into a topic I think we all hear a lot about, but
Absolutely.
maybe don't always, really understand. So we're tackling trauma.
Yes.
Using Dorian Marshman's workbook for The Body Keeps the Score.
Great workbook.
Yeah, and I think whether you're, trying to understand your own experiences or maybe someone else's that you're close to, this deep dive is all about extracting those little light bulb moments that can really help us navigate this.
And it's interesting you say that you're thinking about other people, because what I find fascinating about this workbook is even if we don't think we have like a capital T trauma in our past, it still offers so much insight into how our minds and bodies react to any kind of stress, really.
Okay, yeah, unpack that a little bit because I think, you hear trauma and you think big dramatic events, but the workbook really emphasizes that it's not really about the event itself.
Exactly.
It's like,
It's
well,
the
what?
impact. That's where the heart of the matter is. The workbook, it really draws a distinction between trauma and just having a bad experience.
Okay.
It's not about the event itself, but its lasting impact on us, on our minds, our bodies.
Right.
And it's how that event gets almost like hardwired into our nervous system,
Mhm.
especially this little part of our brain called the amygdala. Have you heard of that?
I have, yeah. It's like our little alarm system, right?
Yes, like a little alarm system going off.
So trauma is like hitting the alarm and it gets stuck on.
Yes,
Right.
you're getting it. Stuck on high alert, even when, the danger is long gone.
So it's not just that we're like remembering the event,
Yeah,
intellectually, but our body's actually remembering it too.
exactly. And it's holding on to that feeling,
Wow.
sometimes without us even realizing it. It's incredible. And that's why understanding the different types of trauma, I think, is so helpful.
Okay, yeah.
The workbook breaks it down into four main categories: acute trauma, chronic trauma, then complex trauma, and then what we kind of lump together as vicarious or secondary trauma.
Okay. And even though I'm sure, trauma can look like so many different things, but just having these categories, like, I feel like it helps you get a clearer picture of,
Sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, um, let's maybe break those down a little bit. I think maybe starting with acute trauma. Is that what most people think of when they think of the word trauma?
Yeah, it's that classic example, right?
Yeah. The big one.
The big oh no moment.
Right.
Think about like a car accident or a sudden loss of some kind, or, unfortunately experiencing violence. These are all incredibly distressing events.
Of course.
And while the initial shock might, fade away, the impact on us, on our nervous system, that can really stick around. And this is where the workbook talks about this thing called acute stress disorder.
ASD, right?
Yes, ASD.
So is that like a precursor to PTSD?
It can be. It's a common reaction, for sure, to acute trauma. And while thankfully most people do recover naturally, they have that oh no moment, they process it, they move on. But for some people, early intervention is key. Think of it this way. If there's really intense symptoms, things like flashbacks or nightmares or just feeling constantly on edge, if those aren't addressed, they can become, I guess, more ingrained, more of a habit for our nervous system. And then that's where you might see PTSD developing.
So with acute trauma, it's really about recognizing those signs early on
Exactly.
and seeking support if you need it.
Absolutely. Now, chronic trauma, on the other hand, it's less about a single event and more about this prolonged exposure to stressful or dangerous situations. This could be anything from, ongoing abuse to living in a war zone or even just experiencing neglect as a child. It's the constant drip, drip, drip of stress that just wears down the nervous system over time.
And because it's so woven into daily life,
Yes.
you might not even realize it until much, much later.
You hit the nail on the head. People might normalize those experiences. Well, this is just how life is, without realizing just how much it's taking from them. It impacts mental health, physical health. It's a big deal.
Right. And that kind of leads us to complex trauma,
Yeah.
which is where, it just gets even more,
More layered. Right.
yeah.
And unfortunately, this is a reality for many people. This is where someone experiences multiple traumatic events. And often it's within the context of relationships that are supposed to be safe.
Oh, wow.
The people who are supposed to be caring for them.
Right.
So imagine a child growing up with a combination of maybe physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, maybe even sexual abuse. It creates this really deep-seated sense of distrust.
Right.
And it makes it incredibly difficult to form healthy attachments, to regulate their emotions and their sense of self, their sense of the world. It becomes very distorted through those early life experiences.
And healing from that is a whole other...
It's a journey. It's a
Mhm.
journey that requires, very specific support, a deep understanding of just how deeply trauma can impact someone.
Now, this last category, vicarious or secondary trauma, this is where I think a lot of people might be surprised to realize that they're experiencing this.
Yeah.
Because it's not something you directly...
You don't go through it firsthand,
Right.
but you're still impacted, and it's through someone else's experiences.
So you're absorbing it, almost like secondhand smoke, but it's...
Secondhand trauma, yeah, it's a good way to put it. Think about, I don't know, first responders.
Right.
They deal with so much tragedy and on a daily basis. Therapists who are, constantly hearing about everyone else's pain. You can even think about, people who are exposed to graphic news coverage every single day. They may not have personally lived through those events, but the exposure itself can have a real impact.
And I would imagine even just, on a smaller scale, if someone you love is going through something and just being there for them, holding that space, like that can take a toll too.
Absolutely. And you might not even connect the dots, right?
Right.
You might feel burnt out, emotionally drained, maybe even having nightmares and not realizing that it's actually connected to what you're absorbing from other people.
So it sounds like really with all of these types of trauma, just awareness is key.
Awareness is huge.
But even though we can kind of, put these neat little categories on it, it seems like the symptoms or how it shows up.
It manifests in so many ways.
Yeah. So let's maybe shift gears a bit and talk about how we actually experience trauma.
Okay.
Beyond just the events themselves, what are some of the things that we might notice?
Well, one of the most important things to remember is that trauma, it can be sneaky.
Okay.
It doesn't always show up in big, obvious ways.
Right. Not everyone's having flashbacks and...
Right. It's not always the stereotypical, war veteran having a flashback, although that is a very real experience for some people. But it can be a lot more subtle.
Okay.
It can be insidious almost. The workbook highlights that it can show up emotionally, physically, behaviorally.
Gotcha.
And it's different for everyone.
So you can't just have a checklist.
No, you can't just check things off a list. It's really about paying attention to yourself, to those patterns.
Okay, well, let's talk about some of those signs then. I know the workbook talks about how it impacts us emotionally. And one of the things that really stuck with me was this idea of emotional dysregulation.
Oh, that's a big one.
It is, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I feel like I hear it everywhere now, and I'm like, but what does it actually mean?
Right, well, imagine this. Your emotions have a volume knob, right?
Okay.
With emotional dysregulation, that volume knob is either cranked up to 10 all the time, or it's just completely broken.
Oh.
It's that feeling of, getting really overwhelmed by things that other people might brush off, or just having reactions that feel way out of proportion to what's actually happening.
So it's like your toast burns and you're in tears.
Exactly. Or, you have to give a presentation at work, which you've done a million times, but suddenly you're paralyzed with anxiety.
Right.
And it's because essentially trauma has thrown off your brain's ability to process and regulate your emotions in a healthy way. So instead of those emotions just flowing through us, they get stuck, they get amplified, or we just try to bury them all together. And that obviously creates problems.
It's like your fight or flight, but with feelings?
Yes. You got it.
Wow.
And it can manifest in so many ways, right? Some people, they become hypervigilant, always on edge.
Right.
And then other people, they go the opposite direction. They shut down, they feel numb, and they think, well, this is better than feeling everything so intensely.
Right. Which kind of makes me think about, that mind-body connection that the workbook talks so much about.
Yeah.
Because it's not all in our heads, right?
It's embodied.
It really is.
It really, truly is. That's why I think the title of the book, The Body Keeps the Score, is so brilliant.
It's so good.
Because it really highlights this often overlooked aspect of trauma. Because people, they might think, oh, I'm having trouble sleeping, or, my stomach is always tied up in knots, must have been something I ate. But they don't connect the dots to what's really going on.
It's like our bodies are trying to tell us something.
They are. They are screaming sometimes.
But we don't always know how to listen.
We don't speak the same language.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So the workbook does a good job of kind of translating that.
Yes, it does. It explains how trauma can manifest in a whole host of physical ways. We're talking digestive issues, chronic pain, weakened immunity. Trauma can actually increase your risk for things like heart disease. It's wild.
Oh, okay.
These aren't just random things that are happening. They can be our body's way of trying to process and respond to what we've been through.
So it's about learning to listen, even if it doesn't make sense at first.
Listen to your body.
Yeah, but it doesn't stop there, right?
No, it doesn't.
Because it also impacts how we interact with the world, our behavior.
This is huge. And, it makes sense when you think about it, because after we experience trauma, our brains, our bodies, everything is wired to protect us.
Of course.
To protect us from more harm.
Right.
But sometimes those protective mechanisms, they can backfire.
What
and then
happened?
we end up doing things that seem confusing, maybe even self-destructive, but it's really our way of trying to cope with this underlying trauma.
It's that alarm system again, isn't it? Stuck on high.
Exactly.
So we're reacting to things that maybe aren't even there.
Exactly. So you might see someone who's experienced trauma become withdrawn and isolated.
Okay.
They're avoiding any situation that might remind them of what happened. And on the surface, it seems like a reasonable response. Who wants to put themselves back in a situation that could trigger all those painful memories and emotions?
Right.
But in the long term, that isolation, it's not helpful.
It can actually make things worse.
Exactly.
You need connection. You need support to heal.
I need people. And then on the flip side, some people, they respond by becoming more outwardly focused. Maybe they throw themselves into work. Maybe it's risky behavior, or maybe it's unhealthy relationships. It's like they're trying to outrun the pain, but you can't outrun those things forever.
Right.
It catches up.
And I think that's an important message for anyone who's listening who maybe loves someone who's experienced trauma. It's not about being difficult or not wanting to get better.
They're just trying to cope.
Yeah.
It's about survival. It's about trying to navigate a world that feels unsafe, that feels really overwhelming. And so they're doing the best they can with what they've got.
So it's about understanding that why.
Yes.
Okay, so we've really gone through, how it's not just about the event, the impact it has on us.
Yeah.
Emotionally, physically, our behaviors.
It's a lot to process.
It is. But I think the big question is, how do we heal?
That is the question, isn't it? And the good news is this workbook, The Body Keeps the Score, it doesn't just leave us with a bunch of information about how messed up this can all feel. It actually gives us things we can do.
Because what good is the information if you don't know what to do with it?
Exactly. And the workbook, it's not just like some vague advice,
Right.
It's grounded in science. It connects back to everything we've been talking about how trauma impacts our brain, our body, everything. And that's what makes it so powerful.
So what's step one? What do we do?
Well, the first thing the workbook emphasizes is this idea of acceptance and processing.
Okay. What does that look like? Because I feel like, isn't that kind of the opposite of what we want to do?
It can feel that way because our natural instinct when we're hurting is to avoid it. We want to push it away, those uncomfortable memories, those emotions. We just want to move on. But real healing, deep healing, requires us to turn towards the pain, not away from it. And that means allowing ourselves to feel the full weight of the experience without trying to suppress it, without trying to minimize it, without trying to slap a happy face sticker on it and pretend it didn't happen.
But our emotions, they're not the enemy.
They're not the enemy, no.
Even when they feel like it.
Even when they feel like it,
Okay.
they're messengers.
Well,
They're
yeah.
trying to tell us something.
And instead of, ignoring the messenger.
Don't shoot the messenger.
Right.
We need to listen.
So it's about, making space for them. Even the ones that feel scary.
Yes, create that space within yourself. Acknowledge them. Let yourself process those emotions. And you can do that without judgment. And the workbook offers a really simple but powerful tool to help with this.
Okay, what's that?
Journaling.
Journaling. Okay, and I love that that's one of the first things they talk about because it feels accessible. It's not something you need a lot of fancy equipment for, or even a therapist to do, right?
Nope. Pen and paper, that's it. And just the act of writing itself, it can be so therapeutic because it helps us organize our thoughts. It helps us process those messy emotions that we're talking about. And it can even help us gain a new perspective on what we've been through.
Because sometimes just getting it out of your head and onto paper helps take some of the power away.
Totally. It's like releasing that pressure valve.
Yeah, I could see that.
And what I like about how they approach journaling is that they emphasize that it doesn't have to be this big thing. You're not trying to write a novel here. You don't need perfect grammar. You don't even have to make sense.
So even if all you write is, "This is hard," that still counts.
It still counts. It's about showing up consistently. It's about creating that safe space to just let it flow, no judgment, no censoring, just whatever comes up.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're starting with acceptance, not pushing away, and we're using journaling to help us do that.
You got it.
But it doesn't stop there, does it?
That does it.
Because we have to do something with all that stuff we're feeling.
You do. And this next step is a big one. It's about stepping into self-responsibility.
Oh, and that one always feels a little tricky because I feel like when we've experienced trauma, especially if it was something that was done to us, by another person, it can be so easy to fall into that self-blame trap.
Oh, it's so common. And it makes sense, right? Because trauma can make us feel so powerless.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. Self-responsibility is not about self-blame.
Okay, so it's not about saying this is my fault.
No.
It's about saying, okay, now what?
Yes. Now what? What can I do? It's about recognizing that while we couldn't control what happened to us, we always have a choice in how we respond moving forward.
So it's about moving from, I guess, like a victim mindset to more of a survivor mindset.
Exactly. It's about reclaiming your power.
But that can feel so overwhelming. Where do you even begin?
One step at a time. And the workbook, it actually gives some really great concrete suggestions, but one that really stands out is this idea of setting healthy boundaries.
Oh, boundaries. Okay.
Boundaries are everything.
I can see how that's connected because, when you've gone through something traumatic,
Yeah.
it can really warp your sense of...
Oh, yeah, especially if you've experienced things like abuse or neglect.
Right. Because how do you know what's okay and not okay when you've never been taught that?
It gets all blurry.
Yeah.
So the workbook talks about setting healthy boundaries as a process of learning to identify what you will and will not tolerate in your relationships, in your work, even in your own mind.
So it's about recognizing you have a right to say no.
You have a right to say no to things that drain you, that trigger you, that just don't feel good.
So it's about self-preservation.
Yes, not self-sabotage.
I like that.
It's about learning to honor your needs, your limits. And it's not selfish.
Right.
It's about taking care of yourself.
Okay, so we've talked about acceptance, not pushing away, using journaling, then taking responsibility, setting those boundaries. But I know there's more.
There's more. We're just getting started.
So for everyone listening, if you want to know what to do with all this,
All these big feelings. Yeah.
you've got to tune in next time. Okay, so we left off talking about boundaries. Which is so important. But this workbook, it goes into some other stuff that I feel like sometimes gets, I don't know, dismissed as kind of,
Woo-woo.
yeah, like mindfulness and movement.
Yeah. Those terms get thrown around a lot. But the workbook does a good job of kind of cutting through all that and explaining why they really matter when it comes to healing from trauma.
Yeah.
And it all comes back to the nervous system.
Right, because when we experience trauma, our nervous system kind of gets stuck, right?
It gets stuck in that fight or flight mode. Remember we were talking about that?
Right.
So it's like our bodies are just constantly on high alert, even when there's no actual danger present.
It's exhausting.
It is exhausting. And that's where mindfulness comes in.
Mm.
It's about learning to shift out of that reactive state and into a more, I guess you could say, a more grounded, more present awareness. And what I appreciate about how the workbook talks about mindfulness is it's not about, emptying your mind or becoming some kind of Zen master.
Right, because I think that's what people think of.
Totally. And then they try it and they're like, well, I'm terrible at this. This isn't working.
Right, my mind just won't stop.
Exactly. But it's not about stopping your thoughts. It's just about noticing them without getting swept away.
Oh, okay.
It's like watching clouds go by, You can acknowledge them, but you don't have to get on them and fly away.
That's a good visual.
Right. So how do we actually do that, especially when, our minds and bodies are still feeling the effects of all this trauma? Well, the workbook suggests start simple. Start with your breath.
Okay, so focusing on your breath.
Yeah. It sounds so basic, right?
It does.
But our breath, it's like this built-in anchor to the present moment. So when you consciously focus on that sensation, of each inhale and each exhale, it sends a signal to your body that, hey, we're safe. even if your mind hasn't quite gotten the memo yet.
Right.
And the more you practice, the easier it becomes.
So it's like building a muscle.
Exactly. The more you use it, the stronger it gets.
Okay, so we've got mindfulness, but then there's this whole other part, movement.
Ah, yes, movement. And I get it. When you're feeling the effects of trauma, exercise might be the last thing you want to do.
Right. You just want to curl up in a ball.
Exactly. But the workbook makes this great point, which is movement doesn't have to mean like hitting the gym or running a marathon.
Okay, good, because, yeah, I was not about to do that.
Right. It can be so much gentler than that. It can be as simple as, I don't know, going for a walk in nature, putting on your favorite music and dancing around your living room. It can even be just gently stretching for a few minutes every day.
Because I've definitely noticed, like, even if I just get up and move around a little bit, it shifts something.
It does. And on a very basic level, it gets those endorphins flowing, right?
You feel a little bit better.
But it goes beyond just feeling good. It can actually help you to reconnect with your body.
Okay, which is important because
Trauma often makes us feel really disconnected from our bodies. It's like our minds are off doing their own thing. Our bodies are just kind of along for the ride, and we're not really fully present.
right.
So when we engage in activities that help us feel more grounded, more present, more, I guess you could say, more at home in our own skin, that can be incredibly healing. It's like we're piecing ourselves back together.
I like that. So it's not just about like burning off stress or anything. It's about really almost like coming back to yourself.
Exactly. And it's not about pushing yourself, honor your limits.
Okay, so we've got acceptance, self-responsibility, mindfulness, movement.
We're on a roll.
What's next?
Well, the workbook goes on to talk about the importance of connection.
Okay.
Oh.
Which seems really hard when trauma makes you want to isolate.
Absolutely. And it's a natural response, isn't it? When we've been hurt, betrayed, whatever it is, we want to protect ourselves. We build those walls up.
Yeah, because it feels scary to be vulnerable.
It is scary. And
Yeah.
so the workbook really emphasizes that connection doesn't have to look a certain way.
Okay, so tell me more about that because I think that's really important. What does that actually look like?
Well, it doesn't mean you have to force yourself to be a social butterfly or jump into a relationship before you're ready. It's more about just cultivating those safe and meaningful connections in your life, however that looks for you.
So that could be like calling up a friend.
Yeah, or maybe reconnecting with family members who you feel really good around. Or maybe it's joining a support group or finding an online community where you feel seen and understood.
Right. It can even be like therapy,
Right. Therapy. Absolutely.
having that person who's there for you.
A therapist can provide that really safe, non-judgmental space to process all those experiences and develop those healthier coping mechanisms that we've been talking about.
So we don't have to do this alone.
No, you don't have to. And even those small moments of connection, they make a difference. Like, a friendly chat with a barista, or a smile from a stranger, or just a really heartfelt conversation with someone you love.
Those little things.
Yeah, those little things add up.
Okay, so we've covered so much in this deep dive. We've explored the different types of trauma, the impact it has on us, and these tools we can use to heal. Acceptance, taking responsibility, mindfulness, movement, connection.
Big stuff.
It is big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when, you've read the workbook, you're doing the work, but there's still these, I don't know, these bigger questions that come up.
Oh, I'm so glad you asked.
Yeah, because it feels like this is just the beginning.
It is. We've got to unpack those bigger questions.
We do. So for everyone listening, stay tuned because that is what we are talking about next time.
So we've covered so much about how trauma actually impacts us and then all those tools, to start healing. But I have to say, as we were getting ready for this deep dive, I kept thinking about some of the bigger questions that the workbook, it touches on them, but it doesn't really answer them. I think that's the sign of a really good resource, though. It gives you a starting point.
Right.
But then it also encourages you to think critically about some of those bigger picture issues around trauma.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of those, for me, is the role of society. The workbook focuses a lot on individual healing, which, of course, is so important. But I feel like it doesn't fully address how things like, I don't know, systemic oppression or poverty or just lack of access to resources can really, I don't know, create an environment where trauma thrives.
It's like trying to plant a garden in a desert. You know, you can have all the best gardening skills in the world,
Yeah.
but if the environment's not supporting it,
It's not going to work.
yeah.
And it made me think about this idea of collective healing. Like, can we really heal as individuals when the systems around us are still, you know,
That's such a good point. And it's something that I think often gets overlooked. It's this idea that we can't just focus on individual recovery without also looking at the systems that are causing harm in the first place.
yes. So, like, are we just treating the symptoms or are we getting to the root of the problem?
Exactly. And, you know, speaking of those broader forces, another thing that came up for me was, stigma. We've made some progress, for sure, in how we talk about mental health, but there's still so much shame around trauma.
Oh, yeah.
And that shame, it keeps people silent. It prevents people from seeking help.
Because we still live in a world where people are like, just get over it.
Oh, I know. Toughen up. Look on the bright side. All those minimizing responses.
It's like telling someone with a broken leg to just walk it off.
Exactly. And when we hear those messages, it makes us doubt ourselves.
Totally.
It makes us feel ashamed. And then we don't reach out for help. We don't talk about it. And so that stigma, it just keeps getting stronger.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is a vicious cycle. And that's why it's so important to talk about it, to normalize these conversations, to challenge those stereotypes and misconceptions. Because the more we share our stories, the less power those negative messages have over us.
So it's about creating a culture where people feel safe to come forward,
Yeah.
to say, hey, I'm struggling.
Yes. And to know that they're not alone, that there's no shame in asking for help. Which kind of leads me to another question that I think comes up a lot for people. What about those situations where traditional talk therapy, it's just not enough?
Yeah.
What about those deeper layers of trauma that are held in the body, the stuff that's hard to put into words?
Right, because sometimes it's like, those memories, those experiences, they're trapped in our nervous system, right?
Yes. And that's where exploring alternative therapies can be so powerful. Things like, have you heard of neurofeedback?
I have.
EMDR, somatic experiencing.
I've heard of them.
These are all incredible modalities.
But for those of us who are like, okay, but what does that even mean?
Yeah. So neurofeedback, think of it like it's this non-invasive way to train your brain to regulate itself better.
Okay.
So it's like holding up a mirror to your brain waves and saying, look, this is what's happening. And then you can actually learn to shift those patterns.
Oh, wow. So it's almost like retraining your nervous system.
Yes. It's like giving your nervous system a tune-up.
I like that. Okay.
And then you have things like EMDR and somatic experiencing, which are more about reprocessing those traumatic memories, but in a really safe and controlled way.
So working with the body's own intelligence to heal?
Exactly. It's about trusting that your body knows how to heal. We just have to give it the right support.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing is there's more and more research coming out all the time that shows just how effective these therapies can be.
That's hopeful.
It is hopeful. Trauma is complex, but healing is possible.
Well, I'm glad you said that because I think that's a really good place to kind of wrap things up. It feels like, I don't know, maybe this is just the tip of the iceberg,
It's whole.
We could do a whole other deep dive on all of this.
Multiple deep dives. Because trauma is a big topic.
Yeah.
But even though it's a lot, I think the most important thing to remember is that healing is possible. It takes time, it takes courage, it might even mean getting a little uncomfortable sometimes.
Right.
But you have everything you need to begin that journey.
I love that. And on that note, thank you all so much for joining us on this deep dive. If anything resonated with you, don't hesitate to reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Till next time, take care.